Salah, called in some languages by the Persian-derived term namāz, is one of the 5 pillars in the faith of Islam and an obligatory religious duty for every Muslim. It is a physical, mental, and spiritual act of worship that is observed 5 times every day at prescribed times. In this ritual, the worshipper starts standing, bows, prostrates, and concludes while sitting on the ground. During each posture, the worshipper recites or reads certain verses, phrases and prayers. The word Salah is commonly translated to prayer, but this definition might be confusing. Muslims use the words dua or supplication when referring to the common definition of prayers, which is reverent petitions made to God. Salat is preceded by ritual ablution. Salat consists of the repetition of a unit called a rak'ah, consisting of prescribed actions and words. The number of obligatory rak'ah varies from 2 to 4 according to the time of day or other circumstances. Prayer is obligatory for all Muslims except those who are prepubescent, are menstruating, or are experiencing bleeding in the 40 days after childbirth. Every movement in the salat is accompanied by the takbir except the standing between the ruku and sujud, and the ending, which has a derivation of the Muslim greeting as Assalamu alaikum. Terminology: Salat is an Arabic word whose basic meaning is bowing, homage, worship, prayer. Quote, in its English usage, the reference of the word is almost always confined to the Muslim formal, obligatory worship described in this article. Translating salat as prayer is not usually considered precise enough, as prayer can indicate several different ways of relating to God. Personal prayer, a supplication, is called dua in Islamic usage. Muslims themselves use several terms to refer to Salah depending on the language or culture. In many parts of the world, including many non-Arab countries such as Indonesia, the Arabic term salat or salah is used. The other major term is the Persian word namāz, used by speakers of the Indo-Iranian languages, as well as Turkish, Russian, Chinese, Bosnian and Albanian. In North Caucasian languages, the term is lamaz in Chechen, Chakin, Lakan, Kagan, Ava. Purpose and importance: the chief purpose of Salah is to act as a person's communication with and remembrance of God. By reciting the opening, the first surah of the Quran, as required in daily worship, the worshipper can stand before God, thank and praise Him, and ask for guidance along the straight path. Under the Hanbali school of thought, a person who doesn't pray 5 times a day is an unbeliever. The other 3 Sunni schools of thought say that the person who doesn't pray 5 times a day is an unholy sinner. Those who prescribe to the Hanbali view cite a hadith from Sahih Muslim that states that prayer is a dividing line between a believer and a non-believer. In addition, daily worship reminds Muslims to give thanks for God's blessings and that submission to God takes precedence over all other concerns, thereby revolving the life around God and submitting to His will. Worship also serves as a formal method of dhikr, remembering Allah. Muslims believe that all prophets of Allah offered daily prayers and were humble in submission to the oneness of Allah. Muslims also believe that the main duty of the prophets of Allah is to teach mankind to humbly submit themselves to oneness of Allah, the God. In Quran, it is written that, for believers are those who, when Allah is mentioned, feel a tremor in the hearts, and when they hear His signs rehearsed, find the faith strengthened, and put their trust in the Lord. To those whose hearts, when God is mentioned, are filled with fear, who show patient perseverance over their afflictions, keep up regular prayer, and spend out of what we have bestowed upon them. Salah is also cited as a means of restraining a believer from social wrongs and moral deviancy. According to a hadith in the collection Sahih Bukhari, Muhammad considered Salah the best deed. The importance of the Salah was further demonstrated by Muhammad, who on his deathbed and in the pangs of death would announce, the Salah, and those who are in your power. Conditions. At the bottom of the central nave of the prayer hall there is a niche indicating the Qibla. This compulsory act of worship is obligatory for those who meet these conditions, a Muslim, are of sound mind, have reached the age of puberty. Elements that make Salah valid: confidence of the time of worship, facing the Qibla, with the chest facing the direction of the Kaaba. The ill and the old are allowed leniency with posture, covering the aura, clean clothes, body, place of prostration, ritual purity, praying in front of a sutra is recommended. The place of worship should be clean. In a few cases where blood is leaving the body, Salah is forbidden until a later time. Women are not allowed to pray during the menses and for a period after childbirth. Preparation, cleanliness and dress. Islam advises that Salah be performed in a richly clean environment. When worshipping, the clothes that are worn and the place of prayer must be clean. Both men and women are required to cover the bodies in reasonably loose-fitting garments. The well-known adage hadith by al-Nawawi that purity is half the faith illustrates how Islam has incorporated and modified existing rules of purity in its religious system. Ritual ablution. Before conducting Salah, a Muslim has to perform a ritual ablution. The minor ablution is performed using water or sand when water is unavailable or not advisable to use for reasons such as illness. Wudu is performed by Muslims according to the instructions of God given in the Quran. O you who believe, when you rise up to prayer, wash your faces and your hands as far as the elbows, and wipe your heads and your feet to the ankles. And if you are under an obligation to perform a total ablution, then wash. And if you are sick or on a journey, or one of you come from the privy, or you have touched the women, and you cannot find water, take yourselves to pure earth and wipe your faces and your hands therewith. Allah does not desire to put on you any difficulty, but He wishes to purify you and that He may complete His favor on you, so that you may be grateful. More specifically, wudu is performed by Muslims by washing the hands, mouth, nose, arms, face, hair, ears, and feet 3 times each in that order. Call to prayer. Adhan is the Islamic call to prayer, recited by the one known as the muezzin for the 5 obligatory prayers, traditionally from a tower called a minaret. A second call immediately before praying, known as the iqama, is for the assembled Muslims in the prayer area to line up for the beginning of the prayers. Intention. The person should be conscious and aware of the particular salah that is being offered, whether it is obligatory, if it is a missed worship performed individually or among the congregation, a shortened traveler's worship, etc. The explicit verbalization of this intention is not required. The person should think his worship to be the last worship so that he may perform the best he can. Components. Each salah is made up of repeating units or cycles called rakats. The number of rakats for the 5 daily worship can be found below. People who find it physically difficult can perform salah in a way suitable for them. A basic rakat is made up of these parts. Standing. If this is the first rakah, then prayer is commenced by the saying of the takbir, which is, the hands are raised touched with ears, fingers spread not apart nor together. This is done before, with or after saying the takbir. Both arms are placed over the stomach on top of abdomen, with the right arm over the left. If this is the first rakat, a supplication praising God is said, such as Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik wa tabarakasmuk wa ta'ala jadak wa la ilaha ghayruk. The recitation of the Quran begins by asking refuge with God from the accursed devil by reciting A'udhu billahi min ash-shaytani ar-rajim. Surah Al-Fatiha is recited. For the first or second rakat only, the recitation of Al-Fatiha is followed with a recitation from any other section from the Quran of choice. The customary practice is reciting the ayahs in order found in the Quran. The takbir is said again and the hands are raised as previously described, and the next position, bowing a rukus, begins. Bowing, the palms are placed on the knees. Ideally, fingers are spaced out and the back is erected at an angle at which poured water may not fall from it. Some of many types of remembrances of God are recited for this situation, such as 3 times or more. Second, standing idle is the standing again after ruku. The back is straightened and the hands are raised as in takbir as mentioned before, but saying. Some of many praises to God are said for this situation, such as, the takbir is said and the hands can be raised as mentioned before. The next position, prostration, begins with hands reaching the ground before knees. Prostration, as much of the ground must be felt by the nose as the forehead. The elbows are raised and the palms are on level with either the shoulders of the ears, with fingers together. Some of many types of remembrances of God are recited for this situation, such as 3 times or more. The takbir is said again and the hands can be raised as mentioned before, while the next position, kneeling, begins. Sitting. While sitting, either the left foot is placed along the ground with the right foot upright, or both feet are kept upright. Some of many types of remembrances are recited for this situation, such as Rabbi Fairly. The takbir is said again and the hands can be raised as mentioned before. The second prostration begins. Second prostrations are done exactly as the first time. The head is raised and the takbir is said again and the hands can be raised as mentioned before. For every second and last rakat only you would go to the sitting position again. Otherwise the standing position begins again for the start of a new rakat. Second sitting. If this is the second rak'ah, sitting is done as before. If this is not part of the second rak'ah, then the left thigh leans against the ground and both feet are protruding from the right side, with the right foot either upright or along the ground. The left palm leans on the left knee. The right index finger is pointed towards the Qibla. The tashahhud is recited. Greetings on Muhammad, called the Salatu ala Nabi, are recited. If this is not the last rak'ah, a new rak'ah begins by standing up again with the takbir and the hands can be raised as mentioned before. If this is the last rak'ah, the greetings of taslim are said to the right, such as and then similarly to the left. Differences in practice. The Islamic worship practiced by one Muslim may differ from another's in minor details, which can affect the precise actions and words involved. Differences arise because of different interpretations of the Islamic legal sources by the different schools of law in Sunni Islam, and by different legal traditions within Shi'ism. In the case of ritual worship, these differences are generally minor, and should rarely cause dispute. Muslims believe that Muhammad practiced, taught, and disseminated the worship ritual in the whole community of Muslims and made it part of their life. The practice has therefore been concurrently and perpetually practiced by the community in each of the generations. The authority for the basic forms of the Salah is neither the Hadiths nor the Quran, but rather the consensus of Muslims. Differences also occur due to optional articles of prayer procedure, for example, which verses of the Quran to recite. A 2015 Pew Research Center study found that women are 2% more likely than men to pray on a daily basis. Shia Muslims, after the end of the prayer, raise their hands 3 times. Reciting Allahu Akbar in Sunnis just look at the left and right shoulder saying salams. Also, Shias in the second rakat often read read qunut, which for Sunnis is often done after Salah. In each of the positions, the Muslim usually needs to consider these, which may vary between schools and gender: position of legs and feet, position of hands, including fingers, place where eyes should focus, the minimum amount of adhkar recitation, depending upon whether the worshipper is imam or following the imam or praying alone, loudness of recitation, or audible or moving of lips, or just listening. Steps that are compulsory and necessary in the 5 daily prayers. Note: Shias do not recite Surah Ikhlas in one breath. Types of prayers. Prayers may be classified into 4 categories of obligation: fard, wajib, sunnah, and nafil. Fard is salat, the fard is salat of the 5 compulsory daily prayers, the Friday prayer and the funeral prayer. Non-performance of fard as salat renders one a non-Muslim according to the Hanbali Sunni school, while for the other Sunni schools it renders one a sinner. The denial of its compulsory status, however, is agreed upon by all Sunni schools to render the denier outside the fold of Islam. Fard prayers are further classed as fard al-ain and fard al-kifaya. Fard al-ain of those actions that are obligatory on each individual. He or she will be held to account if the actions are not performed. Fard al-kifaya are actions obligatory on the Muslim community at large, so that if some people within the community carry it out, no Muslim is considered blameworthy, but if no one carries it out, all incur a collective punishment. Men are required to perform the fard salat in congregation, behind an imam when they are able. According to most Islamic scholars, performing prayers in congregation is must-have for men when they are able, but is neither required nor forbidden for women. The 5 daily prayers. Muslims are commanded to perform prayers 5 times a day. These prayers are obligatory on every Muslim who has reached the age of puberty, with the exception being those who are mentally ill, too physically ill for it to be possible, menstruating or experiencing postnatal bleeding, those who are ill or otherwise physically unable to offer the prayers in the traditional form are permitted to offer the prayers while sitting or lying, as they are able. The 5 prayers are each assigned to certain prescribed times at which they must be performed, unless there is a compelling reason for not being able to perform them on time. These times are measured according to the movement of the sun. These are: near dawn, after midday has passed and the sun starts to tilt downwards; noon, in the afternoon, just after sunset and around nightfall. Under some circumstances, ritual worship can be shortened or combined. In case a ritual worship is not performed at the right time, it must be performed later. Some Muslims offer voluntary prayers immediately before and after the prescribed fard prayers. Sunni Muslims classify these prayers as sunnah, while Shia consider them nafil. The number of rakats for each of the 5 obligatory prayers as well as the voluntary prayers are listed below. Sunni Muslims also perform 2 rakats nafil after the Zuhr and Maghrib prayers. During the Isha prayer, they perform the 2 rakats nafil after the 2 sunnah muakkada and after the witr prayer. Table notes: Jumu'ah Salat al-Jumu'ah is a congregational prayer on Friday, which replaces the Zuhr prayer. It is compulsory upon men to perform it in congregation, while women may perform it, so may perform Zuhr Salat instead. Salat al-Jumu'ah consists of a sermon given by the speaker, after which 2 rakats performed. There is no Salat al-Jumu'ah without a khutbah. Wajib Salat. Wajib is salat, a compulsory, non-performance of which renders one a sinner. However, the evidence of the obligation is open to interpretation, with some of the madhabs saying it is obligatory while others saying it is optional. To deny that a fard salah is obligatory is an act of disbelief, while denying the obligation of a wajib salat is not disbelief. There are some who believe that as the 5 prayers are obligatory, it automatically renders all other prayers optional. Sunnah Salah. Sunnah Salah are optional and were additional voluntary prayers performed by Muhammad. They are of two types: the Sunnah Muakkada, those practiced on a regular basis, which if abandoned cause the abandoner to be regarded as sinful by the Hanafi school, and the Sunnah Ghair Muakkada, those practiced on a semi-regular practice by Muhammad, about which all are agreed that their abandonment doesn't render one sinful. Certain Sunnah prayers have prescribed quarters associated with them. Those ordained for before each of the fard prayers must be performed between the first call to prayer and the second call, which signifies the start of the fard prayer. Those Sunnah ordained for after the fard prayers can be performed any time between the end of the fard prayers and the end of the current prayers. Waqt. Any amount of extra rakats may be offered, but most madhab prescribe a certain number of rakats for each Sunnah Salah. Nafil Salah are voluntary, and one may offer as many as he or she likes almost any time. There are many specific conditions or situations when one may wish to offer Nafil prayers. They cannot be offered at sunrise, true noon, or sunset. The prohibition against Salah at these times is to prevent the practice of sun worship. Salat al-Witr is performed after the Salah of Isha. Some Muslims consider Witr wajib while others consider it optional. It may contain any odd number of rakats from 1 to 11 according to the different schools of jurisprudence. However, Witr is most commonly offered with 3 rakats, to end prayers for the night after Isha. The odd-numbered rakats must have the niyyah of wajib al-layl, which is mandatory to close one's Salah for that day. Shias offer this as a 1 rakat Salah at the end of Salat al-Layl, which is an optional prayer according to some Shia scholars, and a wajib prayer according to others. This is to be prayed any time after Isha up until Fajr. The best time to pray it is the last third of the night. It is considered highly meritorious by all Shia Muslims, and is said to bring numerous benefits to the believer, mainly gaining proximity to Allah. There are various methods of Salat al-Layl's performance, including shorter and longer versions. In the longer version the believer must perform 8 nawafil Salah in sets of 2 rakats each. Then they must pray a 2 rakat Salah called Salat al-Shafa'a. This is to include Surah Nas after Surah Fatiha in the first rakat and Surah Falaq after Surah Fatiha in the second rakat, and unusually no qanut. It is after this that the believer performs Salat al-Witr, its long method being starting with Takbirat al-Ihram, then Surah Fatiha, then Surah Ikhlas, then Surah Falaq, then Surah Nas, then the hands are raised to recite qanut, upon which the believer can recite any dua. However, there are many recommended duas for this purpose. Within qanut, the believer must pray for the forgiveness of 40 believers. Then further prayers are read where the believer asks for forgiveness for himself a certain number of times using specified phrases and amounts of times to repeat those phrases. The believer then completes the Salah in the usual way, by completing his qanut, reciting takbir whilst raising his hands, going into rukus and reciting the usual phrase for that, then returning upright and reciting takbir whilst doing so, and upon being upright recites Sami Allahu liman hamida. Thereupon the believer recites takbir whilst raising his hands and goes into sajda. He recites the prescribed phrase in sajda, rises, recites takbir whilst rising and then again whilst returning to sajda, then rises with takbir again and recites tashahhud and salam, thus ending this prayer. It is then optional to recite certain other du'as and dhikr. It is then recommended to perform an sajda ash-shukr and then recite ayatul kursi, and then perform another sajda ash-shukr. Eid Salah is performed on the morning of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. The Eid prayer is most likely an individual obligation, and niyyah for both Eid Salah is made as wajib, though some Islamic scholars argue it is only a collective of the obligation. It consists of 2 rakats, with 7 takbirs offered before the start of the first rakat and 5 before the second. After the Salah is completed, a sermon is offered. However, the khutbah is not an integral part of the Eid Salah. The Eid Salah must be offered between sunrise and true noon, between the time periods for Fajr and Zuhr. Istihara. Salat al-Istihara is a prayer performed when a Muslim needs guidance on a particular matter, such as whether they should marry a certain person. In order to perform this salah, one should pray a normal 2-rakat salah to completion. After completion, one should say a dua called the istihara dua. The intention for the salah should be in one's heart to pray 2 rakats of salah followed by istihara. The salah can be performed at any of the times where salah is not forbidden. The salah must be performed in the Arabic language. In certain circumstances, one may be unable to perform one's prayer within the prescribed time period. In this case, the prayer must be performed as soon as one is able to do so. Several hadith narrate that Muhammad stated the permissible reasons to perform salah are forgetfulness and accidentally sleeping through the prescribed time. However, knowingly sleeping through the prescribed time for salah is deemed impermissible. Qasr and jam bain as salatain. When traveling over long distances, one may shorten some prayers, a practice known as qasr. Furthermore, several prayer times may be joined, which is referred to as jam bain as salatain. Qasr involves shortening the obligatory components of the Zuhr, Asr, and Isha prayers to 2 rakats. Jam bain as salatain combines the Zuhr and Asr prayers into one prayer offered between noon and sunset, and the Maghrib and Isha prayers into one between sunset and Fajr. Neither Qasr nor jam bain as salatain can be applied to the Fajr prayer. There is no reference to Qasr during travel within the Quran itself. The Quran allows for Qasr when there is fear of attack, but does not forbid it for travel in non-hostile circumstances. Sajda of forgetfulness during the ritual salat prayer. If a person forgets to do one of the actions of prayer, he can make up for certain actions by performing 2 sujood at the end of the prayer. This can only be done if specific types of actions are forgotten by the person praying. Tahiyyatul Masjid. Upon entering the mosque, Tahiyyatul Masjid may be performed. This is to pay respects to the mosque. Every Muslim entering the mosque is encouraged to perform these 2 rakats.